Well, it's so great to have you here. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me, Susan. I'm excited.
Oh, great, great. Now I've already introduced you in the intro, but why don't you just tell people who you are and what you do, and we'll get right into it.
Okay, well, hi, everybody. I'm Elizabeth McCall. I'm the Master Distiller for Woodford Reserve. So it's a pleasure to talk with you all and talk with you, Susan, and get into things.
Yeah, yeah. Now we always go backwards. I like to know how people got where they did. So, if you don't mind, could you tell me a little about where you grew up and like your formative years, what you studied, and your family, what they did?
Yeah, so I was born in Cincinnati, Ohio. And so Cincinnati has a very warm place, dear place in my heart. And so that's for those of you that don't know, I'm now in Louisville, Kentucky. And so it's only about an hour and a half, 2 hours from here. So not far. But it is a special place. And that's where I did all my young childhood years. And then we moved down to Kentucky when I was in like middle school. And then grew up here, and I haven't left the state of Kentucky since. I mean, traveled, but I've never lived anyplace else. And I went to undergrad at the University of Louisville, and then I got my graduate degree, master's degree at the University of Louisville. And it was both degrees were in psychology. So I was fixing to be a therapist, and things took a very different turn. I heard about an opportunity to work at Brown Forman and work in the spirits industry using my psychology degree. And after doing some practicum and internships, so kind of getting my feet wet in the therapy world, working in beverage alcohol just seemed a lot less stressful. So I took a chance at getting the job, and it was an entry level job as a sensory technician. And the rest is kind of history. I mean, that changed my life. I mean, I don't know I guess I'd be a therapist right now if I didn't get the job at Brown Forman.
Well, when you were studying, psychology, what kind of things were you thinking, "Oh, I wanna be this kind of psychologist or treat these kind of people?"
I think I had some experience with people that had drug addiction and that sort of thing in my personal life. And so I thought, I think I'd be really good at working with families and helping them work through family challenges. And so that was my kind of inspiration. And I just thought the study of human beings and how we operate was always really fascinating. And it still is fascinating to me. Um, but then doing the therapy part was you take that home with you. You know, you're
Yeah.
driving and you're just thinking about clients and am I going to be able to actually help this person? And a thing about therapy is that you don't your job is to kind of direct people and not actually fix. It's not my job to
Right.
fix them. But anyways, you just carry a lot of it. And so I just when I heard about the job, the opportunity to work in beverage alcohol and just working for this is my mother and me of working for a company that has great benefits and a good pay because I had student loans to pay off. You know, just so it was also that opportunity of like of getting making good money and good health care. So that was another thing. It's
No,
not very
super.
romantic, but
No, but super important. Now, I did, well, in doing my research on you, I heard that you also were a horseback rider.
yes.
Was
And
this
that
something that you had done as a child and
Yes, it
still
was
do?
something that nobody in my family was interested in horses or anything, so it's not like I grew up with that. Um, but I watched a TV show that was set in the 1800s, and they all rode horses everywhere, and I thought, "I wanna do that." So I told my parents that that was what I wanted to do, and they found a place in Cincinnati for me to start. And, so I just fell in love with it. My mom would drop me off there on a Saturday morning, and I'd spend the whole day at the barn riding horses, eat a bag lunch, you know, groom, clean tack, whatever. I love it. And I've always been a very, driven person in that way, like very personally motivated. And I loved it. I loved the whole working hard. I mean, like the weirdest thing. And so I've done that since I was little. And it did the same. That makes me think of when I went to a horse show, and it was over Labor Day or Memorial Day weekend. And I saw people like out camping where we were doing our horse competition. And I'm like, why would you go camping for your weekend and like just go right here and you just have to do so much. And then my friend was like, well, we're at a horse show working really, really hard, like waking up at like 5 a.m. to go and
Right.
take care of our horses, and we're working our butts off the whole weekend for our Memorial Day. Like what, And so it was just funny that I was like, yeah, I guess I don't know how to relax. And my husband would tell you that. Like I'm a constant working person, but horses are amazing. I have a daughter and a son, and my daughter is showing interest in
Aw.
horses now. And I really hope that that sticks. So I'm trying to just nurture it, not push.
Well, how fantastic that you ended up at the brand that makes the official, uh, a mint julep for, the Kentucky Derby. How
I
crazy
know.
is that?
I know. Well, and that's part of like that. This is just such a dream because I remember when I joined Brown Foreman in 2009 and I went on this orientation and went to Woodford Reserve, and you drive through some of the most iconic horse farms in Kentucky. And it was like,
Yeah.
this brand is amazing. It's a dream. And then now I get to work on it. And it's just, it's, everything kind of fell into place.
Yeah, if you're gonna love horses in any state, Kentucky is the state. I have been there, and the horse farms are insane. They're
Yeah.
just glorious. The landscape is gorgeous, so,
Yeah.
how funny. Now, I also know that your mother worked at Seagram's, right?
Yes. Yes.
And, I was just wondering, do you think any of her experiences rubbed off on you in a positive way for you to enter into the business, or even in a negative way, really? What did she think, and did you think while you were entering it of what
So
it could be?
it's interesting because my mom would always talk about her job at Seagram's because she had left that role by the time I was born. Um,
Okay.
and
Ah,
so
I didn't
there
realize.
wasn't an overlap. Um, but when I was getting my job here, she'd be like, oh yeah, and I worked at Seagram's, so I was in alcohol. But it was just kind of a nothing. It didn't influence or take away. But now when we talk about it, it comes out so much more because she'll bring up like, oh, I was the only woman. I mean, my mom worked there in the late 70s,
Oh,
and
boy.
she was the manager of a union of all men, basically, working the bottling line, and she was in quality control as well. So she had a couple different roles, but always in bottling. And the reason why she left was because they didn't have a maternity policy. And my mom was just so overwhelmed, and they didn't have a way to, now we've got flexibility and people are more understanding about, oh, you've got kids. But back then it wasn't a thing. And so my mom didn't go back to work after having my brother, but she'll talk about that but
Uh-huh.
my mom's a very strong-willed person. So I think that rubbed off on me. And it wasn't this thing like, oh, poor me, I was the only woman. She's like, well, I just told them that this is how we're doing it. And but that's Rose Maria O'Neill, and she's sassy. So
My grandmother was also, and just think she's probably a generation earlier than your mother, even maybe 2 generations earlier. She was also the boss of all men. And
what
I just think,
what industry?
book sales.
Oh wow.
And she must have been so tough. These women really had to be tough and,
Yeah.
yeah, and direct and, I guess.
So I think that's what I got from my
Yeah.
mom. And it was just this instilled that belief in me, like, you'll never, you need to support yourself. Don't ever
Uh-huh.
be like completely reliant on somebody. I mean, my parents are still married and they're very much, she's like, it's not like she's like this single woman, but it's like, it just was really important. That was something she always said to me, was like, don't plan to just be like a kept woman. Like, you have value and you're
Uh-huh.
a smart person. So
Yeah, I guess
why?
I got that as well. My mom always said, never rely on anyone. And she and my dad were married for 65 years. So, and she
Yeah.
didn't really work. So, but she also had that, I think, probably instilled by my mother as well.
Mhm.
So you took this job, and you said there was, I thought, a psychology kind of bit to it. What
Yes.
was it
Um,
exactly?
so when you work in the sensory lab, you are reading, or you're testing human response to a stimulus, and our
Oh,
stimulus happens to be beverage alcohol. And so we are in our sensory lab, we're using human beings as our instrument to judge on quality defects, on just anything that shelf life testing, like how long can something sit on a shelf before it changes in flavor profile. So we do all that testing in house at Brown Forman, and that's what I did. Setting up those tests and then being able to interpret the results, do the statistical analysis, all of that, because I learned all that in my psychology degree. Because you would do, I had to learn experimentation using human beings. So it
Uh-huh.
all fits really well. It's not the traditional way of thinking about psychology, but we use it. And then I think you use psychology. Psychology is a great degree because you use psychology in interact in the business world all the time, or just in your everyday life, honestly.
Yeah, I've interviewed some bartenders who study neuroscience. And it
Oh yeah.
is yeah, same kind of thing, and they're like, "We use it all the time when we're creating drinks and looking how people are drinking and what they're drinking and how they're drinking."
Uh-huh. There's so much more to it than
Uh,
just what you see on the surface.
right, absolutely. Now, how long did it take you I'm assuming you're in love with the drinks industry, you're still in the drinks industry, but how long do you think it took you to, fall under its charm?
It was I would say it was a quick love affair.
Hopefully still going on.
Yeah, and it's still going on. Um, because especially when I entered, so 2009 is when bourbon was really starting to take off, and I had a lot of friends that had a lot of piqued interest in it, and so that encouraged my interest in wanting to really fully understand it. And it was kind of learning how to appreciate it in the lab was so I think like within the first year or two, I was hooked on this. And now with Woodford, it is such it's a wonderful relationship that I have. And I'm very protective of the brand. And it's like it's a weird way to think about it, but it is you do have this sense of ownership, and there's like a weird, like the liquid I'm responsible for, even though I know I work for a major corporation. There are a lot of people looking at Woodford to make sure that it's okay. But at the end of the day, like I'm the person who I look at like Chris Morris, our Master Distiller Emeritus. I mean, he was with it since, uh, Master Distiller since 2003. And now I am that. So for 20 years, he owned it and was the person to maintain the quality and integrity. And now that's my job because other people are going to come and go. Managers are going to come and go. People are going to, and they're going to have different, but I'm the constant. And so it's like being the parent or something.
Yeah, it's your baby, I was gonna say, really.
It is. I guess yeah, that's what I'm trying. It's like your baby and you just don't want people to abuse it or do anything weird. So I love it and I got to take care of it.
Uh-huh. Now, just back to your first encounters with alcohol in your business. When you were part of the sensory team, was it all different spirit? Because Brown Foreman has a lot of different spirits. Was it different? Was it all different spirits, or your first encounter with bourbon?
It was all different spirits. So I worked on it from formulated products. I had to bake Southern Comfort in the lab, make all the base for it and test all the flavors. So I mean there was so much that I had to, so I touched everything from
Uh-huh.
tequilas, our whiskeys, our wines, formulated, I mean, everything. So it exposed me to a lot. And then, learning how to make all of it was really fascinating. And then just how everything that goes into it and being on the quality side, I think I developed a really strong passion for understanding what goes into making all of the
Right.
products and a really strong appreciation for that. So that was something that came out in me in this role. And the role was like being very methodical and wanting things to be standardized so that we could make sure we were testing things correctly. So I really leaned into it and found a strong passion for quality in that role.
And so, when did you first start working solely with bourbon? Then, how long had you been at the company?
I had been, so it was 2016 when I was moved to work out at Woodford Reserve. I moved out to the distillery, started working in production out there as quality control specialist out there. And so that was 2016. So
So,
yeah,
7
7 years.
years.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you were working in all different spirits before that, and then
Yeah.
solely, then just Woodford Reserve, no,
Yeah.
none of the other ones.
Mhm.
Did you feel confident to go into one spirit? Was it kind of the direction you wanted to take? Had you been drinking? Sorry, now I'm gonna like ask 1,000 questions at once.
Yeah.
Had you been drinking bourbon? Is this something that you liked and you thought, I want bourbon. I want this to be the rest. As the next step in my career is going to be bourbon because I love it. Or was it just happenstance that it was, the world came up and you said, "Oh, I'm going to take this one."
It was more happenstance, I think, but it also was me driving it. I mean, I was definitely driving that desire to want to interact with the brands and interact with consumers on our products because they were in my role as a sensory scientist. I was able to, we did a lot of things where we would work with our product developers and do showcase. We call it, like, would have the lab open and we would showcase the different um, products that they had developed and talk about them. And when we would do that, I realized how much I love talking about the flavor profile and trying to not just, I mean, I guess like sell people on it, but just kind of, it just fed something in my soul. Like I love that part of talking to people and that ambassadorship. Um, I like when we would have days where we bring like the kids come into work day and it was
Uh-huh.
like somebody had to present to all the kids and I was like, oh, I'll do it because I love that side of it. So I started realizing I had this interest in doing more of the marketing side. And so I started expressing that and, so then and I mentioned that because as part of me moving out to work specifically with Woodford Reserve, I was master taster as well. So I had started training with Chris Morris to be master taster. And in that role, it was tasting Woodford Reserve and being intimately connected with that brand from knowing the brand story to the liquid development and then starting to sort of peek behind the curtain with Chris Morris, the master distiller and doing those presentations and speaking on behalf of the brand and doing that work. So that's when I was like, oh, I really love doing this. I am energized by people, by talking about seeing people's excitement for Woodford. And so that all was going on. And then the other thing with those 7 years of working with all the different products, it gave me, and I was also working with all of our global production facilities. So I was going out to all of our global production facilities, learning how they work. So I was at Jack Daniels, I was at Canadian Mist, I went to Chambord in France. Like I went all over and it gave me such a huge appreciation for how things are made and the connections you need when you do projects in production and when you have to ask now in my role, when you have to ask people to do something that might be outside of their box or outside of their comfort zone, working at Woodford in that smaller role, people see you climb the ladder and know that you were once like part of their team. And so I fully understand and appreciate what I ask of my team to do. And I always consider that when we're doing a master's collection. So those 7 years are so valuable to me. I'm so lucky I got to do that.
Yeah, I'm sure. Now, you said that you were master taster.
Mhm.
What does that involve? I mean, is that something that you learn or do you just have it and you find that you have it? The tongue. I know
Yeah.
when I took the WSET and they're like, "What does this taste like?" I was like, "Well, they'll give me a bourbon or would I say rum?" And I'd be like, "It tastes like rum." That, is it something that you feel like you developed or you naturally had?
I think it's a combination. It's something I naturally had,
Uh-huh.
and then you nurture it and learn to really, really develop it. And that
Mhm.
was what happened. And because I was part of my role in the sensory role, we started the quality descriptive analysis panel. So I was starting that work away from even doing stuff with Chris Morris. So I was already starting to figure out, okay, how do we measure whiskey in a qualitative way, but in a way that we can all be sort of build a consensus around the flavor profile. So you could look at
Uh-huh.
a whiskey, you could look at a new whiskey and judge the spiciness of that distillate versus one that's a fully mature whiskey and it's all on the same scale. And it's very challenging to do that. But we worked with some sensory groups on that, and that was I what developed that. So that really got my palate tuned in, and but I still have to do it. I mean, I have aroma jars here that I'll open up and just refresh my brain, because you just need that to set your reference point again. Like, what does clove smell like again? And so
Yeah.
that was something that I really developed. And then as a master taster, got to really figure out how I apply that to the specific role with Woodford Reserve.
Yeah, I saw that you were on the committee to do that, that you had put together the kind of the notes, the how to properly nose and taste things. And I was like, how do you come to consensus with that when,
Yeah.
maybe they're different ages and, I know my nephew was like, okay, you guys can't taste anything because you guys are so old now. You have no taste buds left. I was like, hold up there. But, it's that how did you come to consensus, or did you
Well,
even?
we would, because the way that we did, we had POs that we trained, and we started with, you create references. So basically, and it converted over to, we started with like, here's a really fruity scotch, and this is the
Okay.
one. This is, if something's going to be dried dark fruit, and this is the, on a scale of 1 to 10, this is a 10. Then everything else, how does it compare to that? And so you have to have these anchoring references. And then we converted it over to Jack Daniels. So it was like, Jack is your standard. And so maybe on the fruity scale, it's at a 7. And
Okay.
then on the brown sugar scale, it's a little bit more like a 5, or, and you just kind of work it that way. And then smoke at 0. And then you have a reference of maybe Ardbeg as your,
Of
this is
course.
smoke. And if it's going to exist in whiskey, this is what it looks like. And so that's where you have your anchors, and that becomes your reference, that if you're going to give something this rating, it has to compare to your reference point. And so then that kind of becomes how you standardize. And afterwards, we would kind of talk, like if somebody was a major outlier, they would be, we would have to maybe talk to them, like, okay, why did you choose that? And they
Right.
could get kicked out of the panel or something.
All right.
And that's
I
that's
love
what
it.
they're an instrument. So you
Uh,
would, with an
of
instrument,
course.
you pick out your outliers.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Now, coming to Woodford Reserve, what was the first role that you had there?
I was the senior quality control specialist,
Okay.
and I
So I
was
guess
I worked in the processing and dumping area, so where we would dump all of our batches. So I was up in that part of the distillery.
and what was it like working, your initial thoughts about working with just one brand?
Oh, I loved it. I mean, there's so much pride, because I had spent a lot of time out at Woodford already, developed really close relationships with everyone there. And so then getting to work out there and be boots on the ground and just wear, steel toe boots every day, and you got to just, I don't know, I love that work. And I love when I do get to go out to the distillery, just be with the distillery team and not be master distiller, but just be myself. And I mean, they all, I don't like think of me that way, but they all knew me before I became in this role. And so it's just nice to talk and talk about whiskey and what we can do to improve it. And I don't know. It's just, there's great people that work at Woodford. It's like the
Yeah,
dream team out there.
and to be, only the third, master distiller ever is quite a thing. To tell me a little bit about working with Chris and progression towards being assistant master distiller, and then him handing the reins over to you.
Um,
As well as you can. I know it's a lifetime of knowledge, but
it is.
kind of handpick the things that really that maybe he taught you or that you figured out on your own.
Um, so he taught me almost everything I know. I always joke that he's like my bourbon dad. I mean, he is somebody that's just extremely special to me, and that I can go to him with any issue. There's a huge um, level of comfort and a trust between he and I. And that developed over time, because it went from being, this is Chris Morris, and putting him up on this pedestal of oh my God, he's this legend. And I am going to go like ride around with him and learn from him. How cool. And not even knowing what do I say and how do I act. But um, he and I meshed like right away. There was no, just such a nice level of comfort. And he shares I remember my first trip with them going down to Nashville. And it was like being on a narrated like bus ride or something. Like every stop he's like, do you know what happened here? And there's this, and he has historical information and little bits of trivia about everything. And so he's just a fascinating person to be around. But so and now it's like he like I mean, he is family at this
Right.
point. And so it's funny because now I can be like, Chris, what are you doing? Or I mean, it's the way that I talk to him is like a family member. And so it's shifted from being this person like, oh, I don't even know how to talk to you, to now we just can totally shoot the breeze. But he taught me so much. A lot of it was like, I mean, he really taught me my presentation skills of like of how do you act at an event, like to going up and introducing yourself to people, and how to present at a dinner, and so all those sorts of things, and then how to handle tough situations in the distillery or things that are going on with the brand, and where you have to kind of put like when quality is at stake and you have to really fight for it. And he's taught me how to handle those situations. He taught me how to innovate and how to maintain brand integrity. And that is something, I mean, he's teaching that to all the teams at this point. Really, because I think something that's really important, and I don't know, he's been around so long, but understanding your brand's identity and what your brand stands for, and not going all over the place just because it's what's cool. It's like stay true to your values. And that's kind of important about, I guess, you as a person in life. And so he always would talk about Woodford Reserve as like a human and like a person in a way. And and also so it's really important to make sure that we keep maintaining Woodford and what is, so we can't just, we're not just going to do some sugary thing with it, or like, a liqueur or something. It's like, what do we stand for? And so that's been something that's been huge, and it's what drives all the innovation. It's like we're going to do things in a natural way, using grapes that have been toasted instead of using flavors, and we're going to use different wine barrels and things that are premium, to work with this brand to do innovation. And then another thing that he taught me that I think is so important, especially because he's a very humble person. And when you're in a role where it is a big role. I mean, somebody said to me yesterday, they're like, so you're kind of famous, aren't you? And I was like, no, no, that's a stretch. I can walk anywhere and nobody knows who I am. That's not famous. Um, but everything I have gotten to do in my career, the amazing trips, the amazing events I've gotten to do, the Derby, it's all because of Woodford Reserve. It's not, I mean, yes, I do a lot. I'm good at my job, but I wouldn't be doing these things if it wasn't for Woodford. And Woodford is why I get to do all these amazing things in my job. And I never lose sight of that I'm here to represent Woodford. I'm here to speak on Woodford's behalf because Woodford can't speak for itself. So that is just something and it keeps you humble, and it keeps you grounded, and trying to just always remember to put Woodford first. And when you're out doing your job, it's
Being
not
devil's
about me.
advocate that I am, of course, I know that is all true, but I'm sure when you're stepping into a role like this, you also can't help but think, "Ooh, what can I do now?"
Yeah.
I think that's just human nature. And
Mhm.
especially because you have the master's collection, the distiller's collection, all of these things. Um, Other than preserving the liquid, obviously goes without saying. Were there, now that you've been in this role almost 2 years, were there things that had wanted to do when you were assistant master distiller and you got to finally do them, or you even thought of them when you became the master's distiller?
Yeah, we are doing some switching some things up. So yeah, I mean, I can't reveal too much, but I've always wanted to play with Prue. and maybe step outside of doing things just at 90.4 proof. So I think be looking for that to come from me is and it's not about just doing a high proof just to do a high proof, but to display the whiskey in the way that is the best that I really enjoy. And that I just feel like sometimes I open up barrels and I taste them and it's a higher proof and I'm like, oh, I can't bear to cut it all the way down to 90.4. I love my 90.4 Woodford Reserve bourbon. I drink it all the time, but sometimes when something's really special, there's just a better presentation at a higher proof. So you'll see that, and then even age and really trying to play in that space. And so that'll be an interesting thing too, because we've never done an age statement. And so those are things that I think will be the biggest difference. But other than that, when it comes to, I mean, we just filled some Cabernet barrels, and I love Cabernet red wine. So we'll do that and see how that does. And so it's just kind of a fun playing in that space. And I think it's stuff that Chris will be proud of. He's proud to see me do it, and it's stuff that he never really did. And so it'll
Now,
be
we didn't really talk about your relationship with bourbon, as, even younger. Did you drink bourbon when you were younger? Is it something that, maybe your dad drank or your mom drank?
so it was something that my dad would come home every night and have his one bourbon. I mean, and he still is that way. My mom's a beer drinker, so she
Alright.
puts ice in her beer, and he's not that person. But my dad always drank bourbon when he would get home, and so but when I was younger, I didn't know how to drink it. I mean, it sounds so weird to say now, but I felt like I couldn't fathom the idea of drinking a high proof spirit, anything,
Mhm.
neat or on the rocks. Like I had to mix it. I just was like,
Uh-huh.
you don't drink that straight. Gross. So it took me a while to appreciate how to drink bourbon, just enjoy it for what it is. And I mean, I do love cocktails. But but when I mean, I'm not really embarrassed by it. I find it funny. I mean, when I went out, it was the early 2000s, and, people were drinking vodka, and vodka
Right.
soda was huge. So I would have my vodka soda and lime and go
There's
about my
nothing wrong with
business.
that.
I
Yeah.
know. I mean,
There's nothing wrong with that.
so that's what I was drinking. And then when I started at Brown Foreman, that's when I learned how to drink bourbon and appreciate it. And now, I mean, if I'm I just pour it over the rocks. I am a bourbon on the rocks kind of girl. I don't really drink it neat unless I'm tasting something that's a little special, a little more elevated. But on regular bourbon, I'm bourbon on the rocks. And because I just love it. And it tastes so good. And when I go places, I mean, it really, I don't know what I'm either red wine or bourbon. That's it.
I'm not saying this because I have you on the other side of the microphone, but yes, bourbon is my favorite spirit as well. I was interviewing a brand ambassador once, and a brand ambassador for a bourbon, and she said, "Bourbon is my husband, and tequila is my lover." And I love that because those are actually my two favorite spirits.
Yeah.
Sorry, and I feel that as well. Yes, but I'm an old-fashioned girl. I like it with a little bit
Yeah.
of the sugar,
Yeah. No, I
but
love old fashioned
it's
and
really
that. I mean,
delicious.
I like when
And
somebody else is making me a cocktail.
and mint juleps. Oh, me too, as well. Now, I also read that, you said that Chris Morris, was such a historian, and, the things that you loved was, delving into flavor and also sustainability. And I was wondering if you've gotten to do that in your new role.
Yes. So I've been really heavily involved with the Kentucky Rye Project and bringing back rye for commercial use to Kentucky because rye doesn't grow well in Kentucky on any large scale. People do it on a smaller scale, but on a large scale, it's very challenging. And it's a big sustainability play because once you harvest corn, you can put the rye, plant it, and cover it as a winter cover crop. And it does wonders for your soil. It stabilizes the topsoil so you don't see as much soil runoff into your streams. So it cleans up your waterways. And then it sequesters carbon from the atmosphere and draws it down into the soil. So it actually fertilizes the soil as well. So it has so many benefits as a cover crop. So that's one piece of it. But then if you can take it and have it go to seed and actually harvest the rye seed and have that as and then sell it, then it becomes more than just a cover crop. It's now has an economic component to it as well. So that's been a project that I've been working on myself with Woodford Reserve and then the University of Kentucky. And so there's several people involved in it. And it's just in the farmers, really. We've got 4 dedicated farmers to doing all the dirty work of the data research and working with our to learn when do you plant, when's the best time to plant and all that. So there's so many different facets to that work, but that's it's a 5-year project and we've already completed year 1 and we're on year 2 and we're about to meet in a couple weeks to kind of gear up for this next harvest and see how things are going. So it's just really fascinating. I've learned a lot about farming. It just gives you such a great appreciation for all the work that goes into that.
And have you been able to use that rye in your rye?
Yes. Yeah. So we've been using Kentucky grown rye because this is like phase 2 of this Kentucky rye project. And so we've been for the past 5 years, once a year using Kentucky grown rye in our Woodford whiskey. Only a small quantity because there's not a lot of it, but so that's been really fun to be a part of that project.
And did you find that it changed? Like the taste was different from before when you were using a different state's rye?
Yeah, it's a slightly more floral and fruity than the standard plump rye, which is a little more grassy. So that we've seen, and that's just in the new make distillate. And then it kind of fades out as it gets mature with the barrel influence. You don't see all those subtle differences, but it's hard to say. I mean, that was just 1 year's crop. So,
Right.
we'll see. We've got lots of years to start comparing. And so we're doing all that flavor research as part of this study.
And I wonder if the corn will then have a different flavor.
Well, we haven't noticed
I know
anything.
nothing about farming though,
Yeah,
so I have no idea.
we
I
haven't
could be
noticed anything with flavor, but the
uh-huh.
yield. So just that
Ah,
we've seen
uh-huh.
a greater growth rate of your
Okay.
corn. Our farmers are seeing that because the soil's healthier.
Uh-huh. And you also, of course, make wheat, malt, rye, and corn spirit,
Mhm.
bourbon. How have how have first there was the corn, the bourbon. Have you seen them grow? Have people really responded to them? So, let me say that again. How have you seen them grow? Have you seen people really respond to them?
Um, yes, but they're so small that like our rye whiskey is a fantastic rye whiskey. I think the flavor is phenomenal on it. But we don't have the facility capacity to make a ton of it. So it's
Uh-huh.
always going to be a little smaller. And then our wheat and malt, they're beautiful liquids, but I just think that they're so limited. I mean, they're always out. They're not something that we're one time a year release, but they're just so small that people don't really know about them. And so I think when we get more people tasting them, that'll kind of the interest will grow, but they're always going to be really small expressions of Woodford.
And for your, you've had a lot of, I have a list here of the past distiller series expressions. There's a lot
Mhm.
there,
Yes.
tons. Which ones are you still making, were kind of your favorites that
Well,
you loved?
so with Master's collection, it's a one and done. So we don't repeat them.
All right.
But we're kind of toying with the idea of do we bring back ones that people just were extremely popular, that I loved because I do. There's a few of them that I'm like, they were just so good. Like I loved our Pinot Noir finish. The the Chardonnay finish is one of it's Chris Morse's favorite Masters collection, and so it's like we should bring it back and
Also,
talk
you described one in a different podcast about the heavy toast. I even wrote it down, dessert bourbon.
Oh, our is it the double double or
Yes, I
the
think it was
yeah
that. And oh my God, that sounded so good. I was like, is there any left?
yeah. Well, double we actually we just released it to the nationally in the US. So it used to be
Uh,
just something we would only have available in the state of Kentucky. And now it's available in the USA and Canada. So we're really, really excited that people are getting their hands on that, and
huh.
people are pumped about that because it is delicious.
Yes, when I get it home, I may have my mom order one just to make sure we have we have one because the way you described it sounded so good, and, I love a bourbon both before dinner and after dinner, so to
Mhm.
have something that you call a dessert bourbon just has to be good, just has
Oh
to be
yeah.
great.
Yes.
Now, the Distiller series,
Mhm.
so you talked about the Master Collection. The Distiller series, how is that different from the Master Collection, just for people who might not know?
Yeah, so the distillery series is one that we only release in the state of Kentucky. And
Oh,
so it's only released there and predominantly at our home place. And
okay.
it is small runs that we don't have the ability to scale up to like a master's collection level. And they're really meant to be just nice offerings for thank you for coming to visit us. And here's an opportunity to get something unique you can't get anywhere else.
That is such a reason to hear that, everyone. That is a reason to go visit Kentucky, man.
Yeah.
Yes. It's the stuff that you can't get anywhere else. So also, I was wondering, what changes have you seen since you've been there for a while?
I mean,
Um,
a lot.
Go ahead. I'm sure.
A lot. Well, we've doubled capacity at our distillery. So we went from 3 pot stills to now we have 6 pot
Right.
stills. We have 16 fermenters. So we've exploded immensely. And in what's really changed. So not only have we grown physically in the amount of equipment we have, but then the time, like when I first started going out to Woodford, we bottle twice a week. And then now, then we got to a point where we were bottling 24/7 across 3 shifts. And now we've been able to rejig it. We send some of our products to our Louisville campus to be bottled. And so that has helped alleviate some of that. But now, I mean, it's just crazy how we're 5 days a week, 2 shifts bottling constantly. Just a huge team of people. I mean, it's just it used to be such a sleepy place out at Woodford, and now it is not so much. We're always going and going.
It is incredible. I mean, I do a cocktail tour, and when I talk about, how things have changed, it's really in the past, not even 20 years. And, the love of bourbon around the world now is just insane. I mean, the British Bourbon Society, it's incredible that this liquid has really, people have fallen in love with it again after, the vodka tonic years,
Yeah,
it's really incredible. And to hear that you just bottled twice a week, even a few years ago, really,
I know,
is insane.
I know.
I
But it's
never
just
would have thought that, especially such a popular brand as Woodford Reserve.
yeah. I mean, that was probably when I that was probably around 2010, 11.
Huh.
It was like that, and now it's just taken. I mean, it's just to see like our bottling line, how it has changed. I mean, it went from being something that you bring over a few cases and people would take the bottles out and put them on the line themselves to now we have like depalletizer and you know an uncaser that's all automated. It's just crazy to see how much it's all changed and it's like Frankenstein or our little bottling line. But
Now,
um,
before you go, I want to just bring down the bottle for that because I always think it's fun for people to look at the bottle, especially if they're looking at the video. So, guys, look at the video
yeah.
on YouTube. And I heard that you practiced your signature.
I did.
You practiced
Um,
your, so what can you just tell people what they find when they read
the
the
label.
label?
Yeah, so we've got
I know it's backwards on the video,
the
but
batch number on there, the percent ABV,
so that's the
and
batch number.
you've got
Yeah.
the like our signatures on there. So you've got Chris Morris's signature and
Yeah.
my signature slowly rolling out to other bottles. And so you'll see Elizabeth McCall on there.
It's my terrible eyesight. I'm like, "Oh, and it's yours." Oh, yeah, of course it's not.
I
So, the
haven't made
next
it.
bottle I have will be yours.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, I know. It's slowly making its way out there. But yeah, when I was practicing my signature for that, I was like, I've got to get this right and make sure it looks good. So I went to, I did a bunch of them on white paper and then took my signature to my colleagues that work in the sensory lab. And they're the most honest people that I work like. They know me from when I was nobody, and talking about breakups and boyfriends and now married, it's like they've been with me the whole journey. And so they're good at being very critical. And I love that. And so I went and I was like, okay, which one do y'all like? And they picked and criticized everything. And so then that was how I picked which one which one was the best.
Well,
So
see, it's kind of you came full circle because you
mhm.
went back to the sensory lab, right?
Oh yeah.
Um, yep,
Yeah.
to get,
They're my people. So
yeah.
let's go back to them.
Well, this has been really, really fabulous. It's been great talking to you about your journey,
Well,
to
thank
Master
you. This is a
Distiller.
fun interview. I appreciate it because, like you said, I've done a lot of interviews. And so this one was really enjoyable. Thank you.
Yes, yes, if anyone wants to geek out about, bourbon, she's on tons of bourbon podcasts, so, go ahead to those, but this one has definitely been about you, and it's been really, really great to get to know you, so thank you for spending the time with me.
Yeah. Thank you, Susan. This was wonderful.
Alright, thanks.